Anybody who went to school with me will know, usually I'm out here speaking about some left-wing cause. So before you go up, I've got a few things I want to say. Scott Seidowitz, class of 1992, Masters. I have the honor of introducing my good friend, Maeve Coburn. So I was trying to think what I would say to introduce Maeve. And I really wanted to just share a little anecdote about my beautiful wife who's right here. And she was asking me, who should I really meet in your class? And I was thinking about it, I said, well, there's this woman that went from being an engineer to going through the ranks of marketing and going to the top level of marketing in the beauty and fashion industry, and now she's in change management. So she went from engineering to marketing to change management, and that's what Maeve is going to talk to you about. I just want to share a little bit about her background because it really is unbelievable. It's truly impressive. She started out with a degree in engineering from a university in Dublin. Then she worked as the only female engineer for a corporation in Texas. Then she came to Sloan. And she and I were one of like 3 or 4 people that actually were into marketing with all the finance people and the strategy people. After that, she started with Loreal in Paris in 1992. And listen to the way she moved through the ranks in Loreal. She had positions in Paris, the UK, Dublin, and the US. The brands she worked on were Loreal, Vittel, is that it?
Yes,
Vittel, Aveda, Lancome, and Kerastase. She was a product manager, a senior product manager, a VP, and a GM of 3 divisions. In her current position as Senior Vice President of Learning and Development. She's an efficiency expert. The stuff they wrote for me. Efficiency expert, shaper of the company's culture. She heads up learning and transformational change for the US, Latin America, and Canada. Her focus is on top executive development and organizational cultural change in addition to next generation marketing and digital capabilities. And I'll also mention she also finds time to volunteer and do good things in the community, Columbia Business School. Boo. Sloan Women of New York, she's an advisor. She supports animal welfare, children, educational causes. She joins us today to offer guidance in shaping company culture and to discuss what is required of you as a leader. In order to do so, please join me in giving a great round of applause.
So I have to hear my voice. It's loud, the voice of God. First of all, I have to congratulate you because you are enlightened human beings. Because you chose to come to something with culture in the name that's kind of fuzzy when you could have gone to the panel on the Internet of Things. So as my husband joked before I left, Maeve, just tell them the robots went there, the human beings came here. So I'd like to start with a question for you. How engaged are you today in your work? Really, just think about it. Do you have opportunities to do what you're best at your work today? Do your opinions matter? Is there anybody that you work with who actually cares and encourages you in your development? So we're going to do a body poll with fingers. And one means you're pretty not really engaged. And I want everyone, in boards and anyone, top to bottom, anywhere in the organization, this matters, this question, for you and your happiness and your personal well-being. 1, not engaged, 5 engaged. Let's see the fingers. Okay. So I think there's more 5s, a few 4s, a couple of 1s and 2s. You probably know this, but I want to share it because it's pretty sad. The Gallup Poll, for the last 15 years, 70% of US workers are disengaged in their work. 50% are very disengaged. 17 are like just checked out, bad. So just think, for all the work that we do, all the thinking we do, if we're not actually doing something to really engage people, why are we here actually? What's it all about? At the end of the day, you cannot be sustainably successful if you don't think about the human beings behind the strategy and everything else. So I'm very passionate, as you can see, about this topic. This is a quote from Lou Gerstner. Culture isn't just one aspect of the game. It is the game. And when I think about engagement and culture, engagement is a very complex topic. And culture is probably the #1 driving ingredient that actually moves employee engagement. I'm very passionate about it. It's probably the single biggest force in company performance. And I wondered in the last session on boards, how much do boards actually think about the culture of the companies? Many acquisitions fail because of culture incompatibilities, and we're going to get to that. So for me, this is the topic. I am going to breeze you through, in 30 minutes, a journey that I'm on culture change. It is going to be a challenge because culture change is a 3 to 5 year journey. And I'm not here to share a beautiful story with great results from this fantastic change that has happened. But we are on a journey where we're seeing some real results. And we're seeing some traction. And I hope that there's some learnings for you. So I'm going to share what I'm learning on the way. I want to caveat that I have spent most of my career in the same company, which is probably very unusual in this day and age. And my journey, my experience is taking a big company that's over 100 years old. And how do you move that company and transform its culture? And given the disruption in the world today, we talk about technology disrupting, our consumers are disrupting us, the new behaviors. There's so many macro shifts, major, massive shifts happening in this world. I thought it would be interesting for everyone to understand, what does a 100-year-old company do to actually shift to be more agile and innovative in this very, very disruptive environment that we're in? So that's my caveat. That's Lou. So a little about me. I'm not going to go through my LinkedIn profile. Thank you, Scott, for that one. I do want to just share that for me, culture is something that's very important. I've learned a lot in my life, and it's a journey that I'm on. So you might have noticed my little kind of Irish accent. I became a very, very proud US citizen 2 years ago. But I do have, I'm very passionate about that. I love the US. But I have Irish and American nationality. I grew up in Ireland. I have 7 brothers and a sister. I got my first job as I joke about it, was in San Antonio, Texas, as a cement engineer. And the company that hired me, I was the only one with 200 guys. And the head of HR for this company in France saw me and said, "Oh, would you like to move to France?" I spoke a petit peu de français. So I said, sure. I was expatriated, and that became my world adventure in life, in seizing opportunities as they came and just being open and having a learning mindset. That's just my 11-year-old daughter, because I had her late in life, and I'm super proud of Kate. And this is us in the Conservancy Gardens of Central Park. We live in Manhattan. And what can I say? I have worked in many functional areas. I've worked in actually all the divisions of Loreal and all the big distribution areas, the luxury, mass market, active cosmetics divisions, the salon business. I've worked in 4 countries. I've traveled to over 35. And I'm very passionate about family and nature. That's where I get my energy. And I have to say, as a 25-year alum of MIT, and I reflect on my life, which is still continuing, I hope for many years to come, I have to ask myself, what is success? What's defined success for me? I get emotional talking about it because I speak from I stand in my truth. What defines success for me is the people that I help and the people that I mentor. And I think that that's something that my mother shared on her deathbed when she had cancer. She said, that is what it's all about. So I'm going to take a deep breath and recenter. And there you go. So that's me. So a little about Loreal, so you understand the context of the company that I'm working for. So it's the #1 beauty company in the world. It is almost $30 billion. It is a $106 billion market cap. It's very, very international. It's in 140 countries. And the market share is 12.6%. In France, it's 19. In the US, it's about 13 or 14. We still have huge runway ahead in growth. But I wanted to say something about the word beauty, because I have some very, very good consultant friends who are with me in MIT. And they often say, when I talk about my background, Maeve, don't use the word beauty, because people might think you're like in the aesthetics world, or it's kind of, it's very feminine, it's not serious enough. Maybe you should use the term personal care, or FMCG. And I just wanted to tell every one of you that I think beauty is a beautiful word. And it's something that I will never change because it's big business. It's not superficial. Beauty is something that is not just about your individual look. It gives you confidence. It helps you build relationships. And by the way, I think the world would be a very, very much better place if men got comfortable with words like beauty. So with that, let me see what else I can say about this. So L'Oreal, this is very interesting for people who see L'Oreal from the outside. So this big company, it started in 1907. We bought all our brands. All through the years, we are a company of acquisitions. We have 35 plus brands every year growing. Can you imagine the complexity from a cultural standpoint, bringing in all these brands? How do we do that? And when you look at where they come from, we have 8 different nationalities. And these are global brands that were bought in these different countries: France, the US, Italy, Japan, Denmark. You'll see there's so can you imagine? We talked earlier about how one of the biggest capital outlays is acquisitions. You can imagine, and many acquisitions fail. And one of the major reasons acquisitions fail is the incompatibility of culture. But we don't talk about it enough. We don't talk about that. I find that fascinating. So what binds all these brands together? What makes L'Oreal one L'Oreal? And so this is our mission, to bring beauty to all. Beauty that's rich in meaning, and I talked about that it's not superficial. And this really is a strong thread. The L'Oreal people are very passionate about creativity, about innovation. It's a very, very strong culture that it's very hard to leave once you've gotten the bug. And our ambition, we have 1.2 billion consumers today. And you can imagine for a 100-year-old company, to think we can get another billion consumers, it's very exciting. And when you think about digital disruption, and I love somebody in the last session talked about how all of our business is technology. It's just, we're all in different industries. And I think L'Oreal is actually a technology market too, a technology business. But we obviously have amazing products but the technology is really opening up huge opportunities for this business. It's a very good company to work for and to work with in. Our company stock is at an all-time high, but all of this is not puppies and roses at L'Oreal. So when we talk about our culture, these are the values that we've had since the start. Belief in people, passion for beauty, innovation, entrepreneurial spirit, open-mindedness, quest for excellence. These can have shadow sides, by the way, some of these strengths, and responsibilities. But as I mentioned earlier, we are being disrupted. And I think most companies are being disrupted right now. I wanted to give you one example of a disruption, and it's on the digital side. I was floored by this number I just saw recently. The number of YouTube beauty video downloads in the last year. First of all, has anyone got an idea? Guess how many? Any idea? 1 billion. Anyone else? 20. Anyone else? 45 billion in the last year. 45 billion downloads of beauty. And guess how many, what percentage were actually created by beauty brands, companies? 5%. So you can imagine, we actually don't control the dialogue anymore with our consumers. So what is a company to do? How do you actually unlock innovation, agility in that space? And then we all know employees are also being disrupted. Employees are less loyal than ever before. They want to work for the sexy startups. We have a lot of niche players. Although we're by far number 1 in our space, the number 2 is half the size of us, Unilever and personal care. And then number 3 is P&G, and Estee Lauder joined number 3. But honestly, the reality is that the competition's from niche startups. There's like 4,000 skincare brands on the internet today, just internet-only e-commerce. So what do you do? How do you evolve your culture? How do you keep this competitive advantage in this context? So a very quick definition of company culture. I won't labor this, but this is something that's always refreshing to rethink on culture. What is culture? It's a fuzzy concept. So I think I like this definition of culture. It is, and actually I don't want to read it so I don't forget my definition of culture. It's basically the way that values and actions of managers and employees create a unique business environment. So the actions that you see above the iceberg and the value and the mindsets and the behaviors that are deeper and much below the iceberg. It is not, and I want to pause and take a breath, it is not the values that you print on your company paper. It is the actual values that the employees in your company embody every day in how they work. And that's a key piece to really recognize. So it is shaped over time. And this is a fun exercise I did with my friend Tracy. And we were thinking, so how old is a typical hedge fund? It's like 2.5 years old. It's a typical hedge fund. Oof. So it's kind of, if you're shaping a hedge fund, if you're the founder, you can pretty much dictate the culture. You're in there, you've got strong values, you can say it like it is. You can shape it like you want to. I think about Amazon, Jeff Bezos. So it's still run by the founder. Jeff's a strong personality. Everyone knows about Jeff and what he values and his 14 leadership principles. And it's pretty clear the culture they want to craft. L'Oreal, 108 years old. We're run by the fifth in a succession of paid CEOs after the original founder passed away. And then I thought, for fun, Canada is 150 years old. And the US is 241 years old. And I wanted to just put it, without being not anywhere political, just to say, thinking about how leaders shape cultures. I think we should really be careful about taking time to think about the topic and to think about how we can intentionally shape our culture. Because we as leaders, whether we like it or not, we can shape it in a good way or in a bad way, but it's getting shaped. You're intentionally or unintentionally shaping it. So I have a greater message before I finish today on that one. So here we go. I wanted to think about culture then, because culture is something that you feel, that you live. It's about behaviors and mindsets. I love this analogy of a big, fat oak tree. 100-year-old, how do you shape this big oak tree with moss and deep roots? I was actually thinking about how deep do the roots go in a 108-year-old oak tree. And I found out on my way on the plane this morning that the oldest oak tree in the US is 600 years old. And the roots go down 15 feet, but there's hundreds of miles of roots that go wide. So there's a lot of digging to do to get to the heart of understanding the health of a big oak tree. And how do you actually get to that? And I just thought the little tomato plant, because if you put a few popsicles, you can form and shape a tomato plant a hell of a lot easier. And that's unfortunately not what we're talking about with L'Oreal. So given that we all agree that it makes sense to intentionally shape culture, who wants change? Who wants to change? Good, you're an enlightened person. Most people don't like to change, but they want change. And the reality for any culture change is that the leader, it starts with you as the leader. And you can't get away from it. You can't get away from it. And most leaders try. They try. They hire consultants. The consultants will fix my culture. They're great. They'll bring, or it doesn't really exist. We're going to focus on strategy. We're going to focus on process and supply chain. The culture doesn't, you can't deny it. It's not going away. And it's going to hurt you if you don't face it head on. So given that you're going to face it, it's good to know, this is the good news. It can be molded and actively managed. And we don't talk, I didn't learn this in MIT. I'm wondering if today it is part of the curriculum now. I think it's something that more and more companies are thinking about, how do we do this? So it can be actively managed. And how do you do it? What's the right approach? So at L'Oreal, we believe it's about the rational approach to change, and it's about the human and psychological approach to change. You cannot ignore the messy, uncomfortable people side of change in any change. And I thought I just want to stop here for a second because I really learned a lot on this. We hired a big consulting firm to do a huge transformation project a couple of years ago, and they did wonderful work on the strategy, on the structure, on the new métiers, we call it, the new data scientists and other functions that we're going to need, building great data capability. And at the end of the day, after they leave, if the people, the human beings that are supposed to change their ways of working and are supposed to work in this new structure and do these new roles, if they're not engaged, enrolled in the change, and can go through and are supported, nothing happens. And what I'm really interested in, having spent so long in L'Oreal, is I asked, why don't consultants actually worry about the implementation? They go, and what happens? And the reality is there's no money in implementation. It would take a hell of a lot of consultant hours and personal investment to actually do the work with the people, to actually engage them on actually figuring out how to make this work. And it's something that you have to do inside. You have to own this in the company. And I have to say, in Loreal, we have enlightened leaders, because while it was a journey, they're totally on board with this approach now. So we have acknowledged that it starts with you. So you, the leader, could have been a man, it could have been a woman. I'm very strong on women and men, and all individuals, whatever their disposition to lead. It's not about gender, it's about capability and passion and talent. So self-awareness. So it's a big word, self-awareness. So this is something we're really learning at Loreal. Do you know your triggers? Do you know what really, when you're not at your best? I'm going to pause there because I think we could all learn a little more about that. I think this is really strong. I think we forget this. Emotions are contagious. So I've learned this recently. Emotions are contagious. So I want to share with you an example of a closed loop system first. So Scott, I don't know what you had for lunch. Your digestion might be healthy. It may not be. Whatever your state of digestion, it has absolutely nothing to do with me. My digestion system isn't. It's closed loop. Same thing with cardiovascular system. Open loop system, I'm angry, I'm agitated, I might be a little nervous. You will be too, whether you like it or not. It's actually contagious. Primates, human beings, it's a very new field of research. It's neurological, mirror neurons. It's been coming out in the last 7 years. I'm going to learn a lot more about that. And this is something that we've been, I've got some nice music in the background there. This is something that we've really been working with leaders to hold up the mirror on the impact of their emotions on their people, because that is really a key step of it. And then, so we've had many leaders, what we're learning in Loreal too, we have many leaders saying, okay, so I want to change. I understand that this is something about, it starts with me, so how do you change behavior? And one of the most difficult things for human beings to do is actually change behavior. And it's not about the sexy new tools. And we spend a lot of our time screening sexy new tools from some great consultants, and they're really sexy, they're really interesting, and I'd love to play with them. They're great toys. But 80% of the time, it's not about the tool. It's about the leader just having the desire to change or being afraid of changing. It's very common, and it's a foundational point. And having the discipline and the patience to say, no, it's not the tool, is something that we're really learning, and it's really paying dividends, to not get distracted with more tools. So the leader has to own that this is the role of the leader, and then acknowledge that you've behaved to change. And then if you want a culture of agility and innovation, you need to create a culture of feedback. So a culture of feedback is something that we've worked a lot on. Big focus on what that looks like, and a culture of feedback. So if you want a top-down culture, I don't know, is there anyone in the military here? I actually don't know enough about the military. I was thinking, in the military, maybe you don't want feedback. Maybe it's autocratic and it's top-down, but then I'm thinking, no, you actually need, even in a top-down or where everyone has to be aligned, they won't stay if they're not heard, if their opinions don't matter. So I think actually it's relevant for everybody. So in Loreal, for us shifting after 100 years, going through a traditional leadership style, and this is a classic internet slide, coming from a traditional top-down style to a more empowering leader as coach, showing how it's done, developing people, asking, not telling, saying let's go, not saying you go, I'm staying behind, is a real shift. And that's something that our leaders are fully on board and are being measured against doing, and it's a huge shift for us. I love this quote because Nike is also on their journey. This is the Mark Parker, the Nike CEO. One of my fears is being this big, slow, constipated, closed loop, bureaucratic company that's happy with its success. And I think all companies fear complacency, even Jeff Bezos. It's still day one. It's always going to be day one. We don't have to let anything settle in. So we talk about safety. This is a very interesting one. How do you create psychological safety? I find this very relevant for the conversation on boards earlier too. How do you create the safety to give honest feedback? And what we've learned at Loreal is that surveys, anonymous surveys, are good and they're the beginning. But for me, it's a toddler step of feedback because it really is not at all adequate to get to real feedback. It begins to build the muscle. And the real feedback comes when leaders make contact with their people. So I don't know about how many of you have surveys in your company that you look at, pulse surveys, engagement surveys, and how many of you actually go back to your employees and sit and actually meet people physically, face to face, not by email with PowerPoint decks of action plans, and actually talk about what's really happening behind this. And a big one, and it's very basic, but most people don't do this, to actually, when you're asking for feedback and you're face-to-face, to not talk. Don't talk, just listen. And it's amazing what unlocks when you don't talk, you just listen, you digest, you go away, and you come back when you've really reflected on it. And what's been really unlocking in that is that leaders are realizing that it's not about them at all. In fact, it's not about their triggers or behaviors. It's about the impact on the people. And you end up, when you're listening, understanding, so it's not just about how you could do better or what's happening. It's the impact on me and how my performance is impacted by these behaviors. And that is the magic. When you listen, you get to that. And people want to unlock that. So that's very powerful. So I want to share that on safety as well, psychological safety. And then, this has been a big one for L'Oreal, French culture. Very global, a lot of international personalities and the nationalities, I should say. But there's a lot of research behind the ratio of positive to constructive or critical feedback. I don't know how many of you do the 5-to-1 in your relationships with your people. Interesting. Oh. Okay. So a few, 4 or 5. How many of you do 3-to-1? Okay. How many of you do like all negative critical feedback? So you might be 1-to-1. Maybe it's 50-50. So if you do nothing else but just take this one thing away from this talk, it will be that if you're only doing 50-50, doesn't mean in every conversation, by the way. This is in your relationship with the person in general. If you only give 50-50 positive to critical feedback, they're most likely not in a learning mindset. Because people, when they hear critical feedback, the amygdala hijack happens, the fight or flight, and they start to get very nervous, and they're not in a learning mindset. So this is a lot of research. I had a lot of French people say, this is American research. This doesn't apply to France. This doesn't apply to other countries. And I have dug a lot of resources, and it does. There's a lot of good research that supports this is global. So I thought that was interesting to share. So in summary, culture change starts, very foundational. Self-awareness, you need to do the work on psychological safety. How am I doing for time? Trust, I think I'm good. To get to honest feedback. I'm going to speed up just a little. But I wanted to just say on this, you can't think your way into right action, but you can act your way into right thinking. We spend a lot of time thinking. And what we've learned is when leaders take the action of asking for the feedback, the mindset, that shifts, something magical happens. And we're seeing some really good things happen. That's Alcoholics Anonymous, which I thought was quite interesting too. I'm almost towards the end of this to get to questions. I wanted to share, this is a model for the people side of change. It is a model that comes out of Bell, Canada, the Profs Key Model. It is something that we have been working with and we found super useful. It looks at the different stages of change that you have to move through in order to have sustainable change over time. Awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcements. It works for individuals and for large-scale change across a whole big company. And this is something that's been very, very useful for us. And so I'm going to do I wanted to give an example of how this works, just so you get a feel for it. So if you look at the 5 key milestones you have to move through, and think about a doctor who smokes. So a doctor who smokes, I'm going to rank from 1 to 5, 1 being he's not aware, 5 being very aware on each of these things. So he's a doctor and he smokes. So he would be a 5 in awareness from all his training. He would be a 5 in knowledge as well. He'd also be a 5 in ability. He knows what has to happen to put it into action. But his desire is clearly low. His desire is low. So what would unlock desire? So an example might be he or she has a child, a young child, and it's like, okay, I want to be around for this child, and I also don't want the child smoking this smoke, or whatever it is. So the desire could move up. And then the reinforcements could also be that child I'll be around when they're older. Same thing with health. So this is something that we've been using, and you stop at the first area where you're below a 3, and you start asking questions for help. And I think I might have just 2 minutes to play a little with this. I wanted each of you to get a taste for the people side of change and something that might help you in your life. Depending on where you are you thinking about retiring? Are you thinking about a new job? Are you thinking about a move or something major? It could be personal, it could be professional. So you take a breath and think about you. We don't think about ourselves enough. And then on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being the lowest, rate yourself, just a little exercise in your own mind, from 1 to 5 in awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, reinforcement. And stop at the very first point where you're at 1, 2, or a 3. Are the instructions clear? They are? So can you turn to somebody beside you and share the first place you're stuck, and one idea you might have that could help move you through it? I'm just going to give 2 minutes just to give you a taster, because this is so easy and doesn't take long. So over to you. Okay, so I'm going to bring you back. This is a really short teaser. I'm going to bring you back. Clap once if you hear me. Clap twice if you hear me. Clap 3 times if you all hear me. Great, you're back. So it's just a taster. To have that connection and to think about that is something that is transformative as well. So this is just to say, I'm not going to go through the detail, to let you know what I spend my time doing with my transformational team. My Learning for Transformation team design and lead interventions at each step in this change path for the people side of change. We spend a huge amount of time, or we're moving on that now, enrolling people in the change. That doesn't mean communicating top down. That means having a space for them to dialogue, ask questions, own this, and co-create this. So enrollment of people, a lot of education on what change management is, crossing the desert. It's a lot about crossing the desert. And sometimes you have to leave burning Egypt, and you don't know what the promised land looks like, but you know you have to leave Egypt. And you have to know what your tribe is, and you have to take 1 step at a time. So there's a lot on that, a lot of work on team interventions for those pain points, a lot of work on breaking silos, and a lot of work on performance management, on rewards, and on removing resistors when it doesn't work. So that's just to say that we're on a journey. We're 18 months into the 3 to 5 year journey. We focused on a culture change for the first period, and now we're moving into empowerment. A lot of great work happening on empowerment, and a lot of engagement from our leaders. Will we leave it there? Thank you. I really had fun. Appreciate it. Thank you.